Digging Deeper family, hello, hello. Glad to see you guys again. Glad that you guys are here with us. And I know what you're thinking. Wow, Tim is surrounded by a lot of really cool people right now. And in fact, I am. We have four of us here today talking about a really neat topic of friendship. So, as I've liked to do, I will introduce them. And today, these three are going to tell me their favorite place to vacation. Get it thinking. Ready? So to my left, we have, for the first time on our show, the wonderful Michael Bond. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Tim. How you doing, man?
I'm fantastic.
Guess where I like to vacation?
Home.
Not well, home right now because of the smoke, but I love to go to Lake Tahoe.
Okay. Lake Tahoe is awesome. Cool. And to his left, we have the wonderful Tawny. Tawny, where do you like to go?
I like to go anywhere where there's water, but mostly the ocean, but I'll go to lakes or rivers too.
Okay, the water it is. And far across from me, the wonderful Rod Showbrook. Rod, where do you like to go?
Hey, one day I'd like to go to Ireland.
Ooh, bucket list item for sure.
Yes.
I thought you were, she said anywhere with water. I thought you were going to say anywhere with family, but Ireland is cool. I mean, go there with family for sure. So, all right. Well, this is a week of firsts. And when I say first, I mean we have Michael with us, just a super awesome man full of wisdom. And we also, for the first time, don't have any of the weekend's teachers with us. Normally, we have somebody, they tell us about their message, but we are not going to waste your time with them talking about their messages because we're going to talk about them. I think between us, we heard all of the messages. So what stood out to you guys on a weekend full of friendship talking? I know Tawny and I were over at Rogue River, where I'm guessing every teacher talked about having the best friend, which is Jesus, but Austin talked about a good friend, a bad friend, and then our best friend. Mm-hmm. Anything else stick out to you guys about this weekend?
Yeah, I listened to Pastor Dan downtown, and the power of influence really stood out to me. I think Dan made a comment that you are going to reflect the influence of your 5 closest friends, and they're going to impact you significantly. So I thought a lot about influence and just, who you hang around, and that's important.
Yeah, I was actually really encouraged when I was thinking about the 5 people I hang around. I was like, awesome, they're all good people. So, good messages, and I'm sure they'll get talked about as we continue through our time. But we are going to jump right into it. Thinking about friendships was fun, and it made me realize just how human, how friendly, how personable Jesus in the Bible actually was. So, Rod, I'm going to throw my first thought to you, and I want to know, what are some of the most talked about or most highlighted examples of friendship in the Bible? I know Tyler talked about somebody at Redwood. What do you got?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think Jonathan and David stand out as probably the paramount one, but, there's Naomi and Ruth.
Yes.
And Job and his buddies Eliphaz and Zophar and Bildad. They get a bad rap, those guys, but they hung out for a week, tore their clothes and put dust on their head with Job. So I think they get credit for that.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think David had a high capacity for friendship with a number of people. People we don't even remember, like Dave or Ittai the Gittite, who said, "I'm going to go with you wherever you go," kind of like what Ruth said to Naomi.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, in the New Testament, I think Paul had quite a capacity for friendship as well. And, of course, Jesus is our great model, but I love that he had these levels of friendship, the 72, and then the 12, and then the 3, and then the one with John. There's so many different examples and models of friendship in the Bible.
Wow.
Well, and don't forget the women that Jesus let travel around with him as well, because they were his friends. I love how the Bible portrays friendship as so important. I think that we downplay it sometimes. I think in our culture, we put our family really high up, our work really high up, but a lot of times we tend to view our friendships as luxuries instead of necessities. But if you think about us, showing the world we're Jesus' disciples by our love for one another, I think if people were to see a community of really good friends, that would be super appealing. So I don't think we give it enough emphasis, or just we don't invest in friendships as much as I think we could. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially we see in Jesus and in Paul just investment. That's what as I was thinking about this, that's a word that came to me, is investment, because, you see Paul, I think it's Acts 20, where he's spending time with the Ephesian elders, and they're departing there. I mean, they're weeping. There's investment has occurred. And even how Paul wrote his letters, it wasn't from a purely cognitive place. And he's brilliant, we know how smart he was, and but he took time to greet people, so relationship was a thread with him. And then with Jesus, one of what I think it's the shortest verse in John 11, Jesus wept. Mm-hmm. That always strikes me, and actually gives me, in a sense, permission to feel and share emotion, because Jesus allowed himself to grieve a friend. Mm-hmm. So obviously investment had occurred. And then, like you mentioned, Jesus and John, their relationship's fascinating to me, especially I was noting that in Revelation, there's an interaction, like interesting comment made in Revelation 1. John has seen this vision of Christ completely glorified, and it's pretty powerful, so he falls down. And of all the things Jesus could have done, Jesus chooses to reach out and touch his friend and says, "Don't be afraid." So to me, that comes across as a personal move. And then you conclude the book with John saying something which, again, to me is personal, when after this incredible revelation, he's like, "Come, Lord Jesus." Come. You almost get this sense of, "I miss you. Just come. Thanks for showing me all that. But come back. We miss you." So, yeah, relationships.
Yeah, definitely. And just from what you guys are talking about, investment is a word I hear a lot in these Old Testament and even the New Testament friendships, but also loyalty. There is just, I think, this deep loyalty to each other. So Daniel and his buddies obviously are people I think of as well. Throwing my examples into that list.
Well, when you talk about loyalty, I've reflected on that a little bit, that some people think loyalty is a bad word, because, like, why should I be loyal if someone's doing something wrong, right? And I get that. We're not talking about loyalty like the mafia or the Bloods and the Crips, right? Yeah. Like,
well, that we know of.
Kill that person, I'm not going to say anything because I'm loyal. No, loyalty, I think, is more about whether you're up or down, whether you're flying high or you're scraping the barrel, I'm with you. And whether your reputation is good or bad, I'm with you. I love you. I'm going to be with you. It's not about, I'm going to protect you from the evil that you've done. I don't think that's what loyalty is.
Yeah, I mean, loyalty is probably a byproduct of the investment that they're pouring into each other. So, no, those are all great words. So we talked about Jesus and his friendships. I want to go one more level into that. There's this TV show going around called The Chosen. Have you guys gotten a chance to watch The Chosen? It's about kind of Jesus's friendship, relationship, and picking of the disciples. Pretty cool. It gives you a look into what that could have looked like. I believe they try to stay pretty accurate scripturally, but there is some creative influence there. But Tawny, I want to send this one to you. What do you think Jesus and his 12, the disciples, what do you think that friendship looked like? A lot of us maybe have this thought that, like, Jesus didn't smile a ton or whatever, but I'm kind of wondering, did they laugh around? Did they prank each other? I would be really curious as to your guys' insight. I don't know how much biblical evidence is actually there, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. So, Tawny, I'll send this one to you.
So when I was like a young teenager, it really annoyed me that Jesus never laughed in the Bible. I had all these weird hang-ups about stuff. And then as I got older and actually got to know him for reals, I think God left that out for our faith. So because as my faith grows, then I'm like, of course he laughed. God created humor. So Jesus had to have been the most fun person that ever lived, because he, is the most intelligent and understands humor the best. And so I think there was a definitely a seriousness and a gravity to him bringing the kingdom to earth. But I think he really enjoyed his disciples as his friends, and I bet they had tons of fun together.
Yeah, I was reflecting this morning on Da Vinci's Last Supper.
Yeah.
And he portrays John, the beloved, as a woman. And it kind of irritates me. Da Vinci was a genius, but he got this all wrong. Jesus nicknamed him a son of thunder. And he was a tough guy. He wasn't this effeminate, woman who loved Jesus like a woman loves a man. And it seems like our culture is only too happy to give these kind of assignations to Jonathan and David. Oh, that must have been homoerotic love that they had, or same with Jesus and John. No, there can be a physical intimacy and love for between two men, which is godly and good and life affirming. And so, when it says that John laid his head on Jesus' breast in the Last Supper and asked him, who's the betrayer? What a wild, intimate moment that is, and what an example it is to us of going deeper. I mean, I can't really think of any man that I would feel comfortable doing that with, but I'd like to. I'd like to get to that point where there's that much love and trust that I could just hang out and put my head on someone's chest like that, And so, I think Jesus led the way in terms of showing the depth of intimacy that you could have in a same-sex relationship like that.
What a clash of cultures, I think, between where we're at now and what was going on in the Bible.
Well, but I think what's so cool about that, Rod, is, and then the lady that washed his feet with her tears and wiped him with her hair. Like, Jesus broke down all those boundaries with men and women to show us that that's the kind of relationship he wants to have with us. And even though we can't have it physically right now, we spiritually we can have that kind of intimacy and closeness with him, and that level of being comfortable with him.
Yeah, preach it.
Yeah. Michael, you got any thoughts on kind of what that friendship between the disciples maybe looked like, or?
I agree with what they're saying. I just can't imagine with Jesus and the disciples, 3 years of intense ministry.
Man.
A very diverse group. They would have watched him go through so many different, literally miraculous moments, so many times of questioning. Some of it we have insight in, and we got gleaned from that teaching. A lot, most of it probably we will never know. But they're just people. They're just people.
Yeah.
Sharing life, and life has a lot of ups and downs. And Jesus seemed to be very much in the moment in the best sense.
I love when, after he rose again and he made breakfast for them on the beach, that's just so human, and so him meeting their needs and meeting them where they're at. I can't wait till we get to hang out with them. It's going to be so fun.
So, and here's kind of one more thought. What do you think was their biggest takeaway, the disciples' biggest takeaway from being an actual friend of Jesus? Friends with you guys, I just have access to so much wisdom. That's probably one of the biggest takeaways I have from being friends with you guys. So what would the biggest takeaway for a disciple being a friend of Jesus be, do you guys think?
Well, Jesus himself says that, I call you friends because I've shared everything with you. And so there's that self-revelation that goes deeper than a normal acquaintance or relationship. And so, I think the takeaway is I know the heart of Jesus, which I know the heart of God. I mean, what a takeaway for the disciples to have that.
And I kind of wonder if different people had different takeaways. I think for me personally, just thinking of him trusting me that much, that he would call me his friend, would make me want to live up to that trust that he has. And that's what would have been the most, and what is the most, important thing to me, I think.
Yeah, we know that they walked and talked together. We think about that culture, it was that culture. You walked a lot of places. I'm reminded of a mission trip I was on where I was with a group of about 12, 15, and over a period of a couple hours of walking across the city, people just naturally kind of change groups, and all these conversations are happening. So I'd imagine that Jesus, being as full of wisdom and discernment that he is, would have had a lot of strategic conversations, and he's so good at meeting us exactly where we need him to meet us. So I'm sure if you interviewed each one of the disciples and say, tell me one of the most impactful moments you have with Christ, it'd be interesting to hear all the different times where he showed up at just the right time and just the right way. Even potentially Thomas. Thomas gets the bad rap about doubting Thomas. But Jesus didn't have to meet him in the midst of what some would say was his failure. But he met him in a place, and Thomas didn't doubt anymore. Part of that's really cool. Jesus meets us where we need to deal with the stuff that we all know we have, but sometimes pretend or hide it from others. It's very, very, very honest. So it's very cool.
I feel like I want to do an extra digging deeper on all the people that get bad raps in the Bible. Thomas, Job's friends. I mean, an argument maybe for Job's wife, who only has one line assigned to her name. Like we've all been there, maybe. That'd be a fun one to do. But yeah, no, Michael, I appreciate that, and I'm going to go ahead and keep it on you. And I think I had this thought. My next question is something I think we struggle to relate to our students very well. And that's this idea of what an actual friendship with Jesus looks like. And I think it's hard for them to grasp because we see Jesus as this high and mighty king. We are unworthy, something bad will happen if we mess up. So, what does, and help unpack what a friendship with Jesus looks like. I mean, if he were just sitting here on the couch with us. So, really curious to hear your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I think there's good reason why people struggle from time to time, or a lot of the time, trying to balance out the different facets of Christ and what it is to have a relationship with him. I was reading actually earlier this morning in Hebrews 1. This description's amazing. It says, "But in these last days he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word." Whoa. It's one of those drop the mic moments. You hear that and you go, oh my goodness, what is it to have a friendship with someone like that? And yet, as we said earlier, you see in a very descriptive language in Revelation this glorified picture of Christ. And yet, as we said just a few minutes ago, Jesus, when his friend was shaking in fear at his feet, he didn't choose to say, "Yes, my friend, check me out. I am amazing, aren't I?" He quickly is like, "Don't be afraid, man." And he touched him. That's a very personal, that's a very yeah, this is who I am, but hey, it's okay. So I think what gives me permission to enter into a more relational aspect with Christ is the fact that he's such a balance of glory and humility, because he has the moment that he can take it on himself and say, "Look at me, aren't I the bomb?" And he always is leveraging it for ministry, even like with Lazarus. He could have come on the scene, he didn't have to weep. He could have said, "Fear not, people, I know he is dead, but watch what I'm about to do." He doesn't do that. He's in the moment. He's with his community and the culture. And that, have you ever been with someone that's been through trial? And sometimes the most powerful thing is when you're hurting, someone comes up and gives you a hug. And it kind of gives you permission to shed a tear and let it out. Jesus enters in with community and is leading by example that it's okay to feel. And when you have relationships, do it well. And if you do it well, you're going to feel. It's almost like Paul and those Ephesian elders. There's obviously investment, and they did it well. So as I look at those aspects of Christ, knowing, it goes on in Hebrews 2, it talks about his humanity, an aspect of him, and that he can relate to us at the end of Hebrews 2, he can relate to us in temptation because he lived the human experience as well. So understanding that Jesus has high relatability. He's walked on the earth with us. He's been through tons of cultural ups and downs. Lets me know that, wow, he does want me to engage him at a personal level. And that whole fact, the popular author Max Lucado has that one book, God Came Near. That's such a powerful title, always has been to me, because it just sums up what a lot of people struggle with and maybe can miss. It's understand, yes, glorified Jesus, high King of heaven, yes, but he chose to come near. He came to us. This is a big deal. So when you say, well, how do you have a friendship with him? Well, a lot of friendships start where one person or the other comes near and engages, and probably the most ultimate coming near moment is Jesus leaving heaven, coming to us. And so that makes me go, wow, if you would come that distance for me, then that maybe was going to trump some of my fear, some of my intimidation, some of my lack of understanding of how can this even be a thing. You know, eventually it'd be like if, basketball fan, if LeBron James called you up and said, hey, Tim, let's have coffee. You're going to be blown away for quite a while.
Let me think about it.
It's going to fade a little bit, and you're just going to be in that moment with him. Might take a while, but eventually you're like, okay, I'm here with you.
Well, and as you're talking, Michael, it made me just think part of the reason, my favorite reason to read my Bible is just to see how God interacted with his people all throughout those centuries, and he wanted to be with his people in the Old Testament. He wanted to be with his people in the New Testament, and we know he wants to be with us now. And just reading and seeing how he interacted and what he cared about and what was important to him helps us know what is important to him now. And it's hard, I think, because he's invisible and he's usually inaudible. And so we have to get to know him in a spiritual way, which I think is harder. We have to seek it harder. But if our motivation for praying and reading our Bibles is to be able to draw near to him the way he wants to draw near to us, I think it makes it less dry and less like a chore and more like a relationship, because we do want to hear him speak to us. We do want to feel close to him. And so that friendship can drive us into seeking him more.
Yeah, I like, Michael, what you're saying about that tension between honoring him as Lord of the universe and having that familial, just casual relationship. And this is reflected in our worship in different churches. And high church practice is God is transcendent. He's up there, he's big, he's tough, and he's wonderful, but I can't really know him that much. And then there's some low church, Baptist and Pentecostal, where we're like, Jesus is my buddy, he's my friend, he's my great pal. And it's like, yeah, but it's both. And it's like, even close friends of the president will say, Mr. President, Mr. President, and then the president says, you can call me by my first name. And and so to keep that respect while still drawing near and seeking that intimacy. And I just think intimacy has a lot to do with time spent. That you cannot be intimate with someone on an emotional, spiritual level without spending time with them. And you talk about fathers with their kids, quality time versus quantity time. Well, you need both in order to build relationships. And so for us, that means reading scripture, spending time in prayer, spending time meditating. That's how we can draw near and go deeper in our friendship with Jesus.
Yeah, I think she was, as you're saying, in that investment of time. Just like with friendships of earth, you can have a group of friends that, we get together, we watch Monday Night Football, it's great, and that is a level of friendship. I remember when a buddy of mine, when I lived in Tennessee, he had to move out of an apartment, and it was basically, the circumstances were kind of crazy, but what it turned into is 2 a.m, he's calling me, asking me if I can help him move his washer dryer out of his apartment. Part of me was like, bro, I'm serious. But the other part of me felt honored, and I was willing to go, because it's like, okay, we have a friendship that you can call me anytime, and I'm actually honored to be there. So friendships deepen as they go through adversity, and you have to work through more difficult things. So I think in our culture, we hurt so often from so much diversity and different things that happen. But if we don't walk with Jesus through our trials, we miss something. In the depth of our relationship that we could have. It's almost like you look at the paradigm that's painted in James 1. It's like, how is it that I can persevere through a trial and somehow grow in character and end up being mature and complete, not lacking anything, well, it's a commitment and it takes time. And you have to walk with the Lord through stuff enough to go, oh, I guess I can consider it joy because I've met the Lord in this and I've seen him work things out. So I think that helps so much with the relationship, and it grows just like any the more time you spend, quality time and triumphant time. Well, we've gone through stuff. Well, that really impacts the nature of the relationship, and it fuels, like the hymn says, oh, for grace to trust you more. It's like, man, because I've seen you be faithful time and time again, I want to come to you more quickly next time because I know you're going to be there. It just enriches the relationship for sure.
It's a lot of good stuff from you guys. I really appreciate that. I had a thought, but I forget it, and it pales in comparison to what you guys said. So we've been talking about biblical friendship, and that's been great insight. And so I want kind of, as you said, our earthly friendships. I want to switch there for maybe the last part of our podcast. Heard this question one time. Kind of thought it was a silly question, but I think it might be good for discussion. What is more important in a human relationship, commitment or love? I think that answer might differ between if you are a believer or not, Christian, non-Christian. But Tawny, I want to throw this one your way. Maybe we start a debate. Maybe we all agree. Commitment or love, which one is more important in a relationship?
Well, I think, unfortunately, a lot of times we think of love as a feeling when I think it should be maybe more of a verb. And as a verb, you cannot love somebody without being committed to them. Like Rod was saying at the beginning, like that loyalty of, I'm going to walk with you even if you're really cranky and not super fun right now. And I'm going to, speak the truth in love to the best of my ability. And I think any sort of love without commitment would be really wimpy, fickle sort of thing.
Okay.
Old Testament really doesn't distinguish oftentimes between commitment and love. God's quoted as saying, Jacob I loved and Esau I hated. Did he really hate him? No. It wasn't an emotional thing. It was, I have covenant commitments to Jacob, and I'm going to carry through on those. Sorry, Esau, I don't have the covenant commitments to you. So commitment and love in God's own language there in the Old Testament were almost synonymous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed. That's what I was thinking, is that love is often most powerfully expressed through commitment.
Wow.
And I don't want to steal your thunder, but you shared one time, and when you were teaching here, just an example, a powerful moment with you and your bride where she expressed to you how and when she needed you to love her. Do you mind sharing that?
Yeah.
Just in brevity?
Oh, yeah, no, it's just how to go. She just said, how to say it, that she was unlovable.
You brought up a situation that you were in. There was conflict, which all of us go through, especially in marriage. There are moments that it's just really, really tough. I think you expressed something like, "It is really hard to love you right now."
Right, that's right. And she says, well, that's exactly when I most need to be loved.
Powerful words from Mel.
Yeah.
Totally. That's
Wow.
like stuck with me so profoundly because, and I've tried to apply that in my own life and relationships, because I find, when someone is offending you or they're getting you to bristle and push back, those are the times where you're almost in the flesh and want to be like, you don't deserve my love. You're not safe for me. I'm not gonna extend this to you. And that is such a powerful thing, because that's Christ-like love. It's like, no, love expresses itself in commitment when the times are difficult, when it costs.
Wow. No, those are good. And so, and I do want to decipher or distinguish. There is a difference between obviously marriage relationships and friendships, and I think sometimes I blur the line, and I think I need to put all my chips towards both. And so kind of my next thought is about this idea of friendships going through seasons. I think my problem was growing up was there was this commitment or a loyalty. Sometimes I use the words synonymously, but that commitment during that unhealthy season of those people's life actually became enabling. And where the marriage, we are in this. I am unlovable. That's when you need to love me the most. Where friendships, we have this ability to set boundaries, protect ourselves, take care of ourselves. It's really hard to discern. So I kind of want to throw to you guys, how do we process going through different seasons with our friends, and maybe when, if ever, is there a time to say goodbye to an unhealthy friendship? I'll throw that one. Maybe Tawny, if you want to take the lead.
Well, I don't think we're ever able to quit loving somebody. Like, I don't think that that's ever on the table as believers to withdraw. Like Michael was saying, I think sometimes in our flesh, we have a conflict with somebody and our instinct is to withdraw our love from them. And I think that's always wrong. But I don't, I two of my closest friends, one has been friends with me for like 35 years. They made fun of me one time because they're like, Tawny, you will follow your friends. They're like dragging you down the street. You've got your arms around their ankles and they're kicking you in the face and you still won't let go of them. Because I so thought that commitment, that love was never, ever giving up. And then I was in this spiritual formation class and they said, some people you can love better at a distance. And that was such a light bulb for me. Like, maybe I don't have to stay in these relationships that are super unhealthy and really harmful to me as long as I continue to love them. So it gave me permission to create some distance, and that was really helpful for me because I felt like loving was staying as close to somebody as possible. And that's not always true. And the other part of that helps me is like with my family. At the beginning of this, I talked about the importance of our friendships, and I really think they're important. But all of us have different friends. But with my family, I'm the only wife my husband has, and I'm the only mother my children have. So there are some needs with my husband and some needs with my kids that I'm the only person that can fulfill. But if I'm one of my kids is going through a hard time, I don't have any extra time. If one of you guys needs something, I can trust the other ones you to get that person because, I can't right now. So I think that's a way of trusting God too, is just taking care of the priorities that are most needed and then trusting that God will take care of the people that we are not able to take care of in the moment.
Yeah, I think, as you said, sometimes you can, well, both of you have talked about, you can sometimes go too far with somebody. What I've found with relationships over the years is that sometimes those that can be most difficult in your life are difficult because they haven't had a lot of people draw boundaries with them. So sometimes you think, well, because I'm a loving friend, I can't call them on it, I can't say that, or I just got to go the distance. Where I think sometimes love goes, hey, you've crossed the line. Now that doesn't affect, where it's healthy is it's like, it doesn't affect my love for you, but you can't say that to me. You can't do that. You've crossed the line. You've crossed a boundary. That is hurting me, and that's not okay. And I think that's actually healthy because if no one ever draws a boundary with somebody, that's why I think a lot of times people they suffer in dysfunctional relationships because no one ever stands up to them. So they never learn. So to be fair to them, they don't know that they bully people, or they don't know that they always say that rude thing in that certain circumstance because no one's ever told them. So as awkward as it can be, I think in a relationship, it's very good at times to say, hey, I love you. This doesn't change that. But you're not going to do that to me.
Wow.
Not
Yeah.
okay.
Well said. I also think, and this might be a little controversial, that there's a bit of a cold-blooded calculus that we need to take on in terms of choosing who we keep as friends. And I'll just give you an example. In my own life, I had friends from high school, friends from college, friends from seminary, friends from Namibia, friends from Tanzania, friends from Kenya, friends from North Carolina, friends from San Rafael, California. And I can't be intimate with all these people. And part of it's just a time thing and distance, but it's also a numbers game. I mean, if someone tells me they have 15 close friends, I don't believe them because I don't know if you can have that many close friends. And so you have to make some decisions about where you're going to invest. And that doesn't mean you've rejected someone or quit loving them, but it becomes a different sort of love when you're seeing them once a year or writing 3 emails a year to them. It can't be the same kind of friendship as for instance, if I'm seeing Tawny or Michael, 5 times a week or something. And so there's some decision making that has to go on in that regard.
Well, that kind of goes back to the seasons. You were close for a season because you were doing ministry together, serving together, raising your kids together, and those are great blessings. But in heaven we'll all be completely united again. But on earth, sometimes we do have seasons in our friendships, and we can be thankful for those seasons and just know that it's natural sometimes for them to end. But if they needed us, we'd still be there for them. But yeah.
My goal has always been to keep 1 or 2 friends from every season in my life. And it's not always possible, but that's the goal. You can't keep up with everyone, but choose the gems and then keep loving on those people.
I'm going to try and use that one when somebody wants to do lunch and I can't. I'll be like, but I'll see you in heaven and we'll be tight then, I promise. I don't know if I will try that. But now you guys said a lot of good stuff. I think the tough love, it's kind of something that I want to talk about here in a minute, has been one of the hardest things for me. It's weird. I have problem kind of maybe giving tough love to my friends, but I see it as such a close sign of intimacy when it is given to me. A friend kind of said something to me, and they said, I'm frustrated that you do this. And they apologized because they came on a little strong, but I was like, you don't understand. Like, the fact that you could tell me that about me?
Let's hug.
Yeah, it was like, that is awesome. Give me more. And so it's a really weird balance. And so, Rod, I want to send this one your way, is how ultimately, and this might be a big question, how ultimately does God desire a friendship between believers to look? What maybe would you say is the pinnacle, the goal that God wants a friendship between believers to look?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think, and maybe it's just a fallback position, but it just seems natural that he wants it to look like the way he's modeled friendship for us with himself and the disciples, right? Here's what friendship looks like. I think, Dan did a good job teaching about this the other day. Let me just read what he said. The practice of friendship: constant, considerate, candid, counsel, a confidant, compassionate, forgiving. That's pretty good. If you can do all those things, I think that is a really life-giving friendship for both people. The trick is in the doing of it all, right? Because we're such fallible people.
Well, and I think for me, it's just, does this friend lead me closer to Christ? Does this, do they bring life? Do they bring joy? Do they, do they just contribute that godliness to my life? Or do they kind of suck it out of my life, and then that might be that might be more a ministry than a friendship.
Right.
So.
Right. I mean, I think friendship has to have a pretty high degree of reciprocity, right? That it's not always going in one direction, but it's coming and going both ways.
Yeah, friendship can be messy. When you look at with Jesus and the disciples, there's just messy moments. Think about Peter denying Christ. Come on. So then you think, okay, so someone thinks, well, Jesus can't relate to me. He didn't know what it's like to be betrayed by a friend.
Wow.
No, he does. And you think, so then what do I do? What's the path back? And you look at strategic steps taken by Christ to make a relationship right. Again, it's Jesus. The bar is high. But you see the values there and how it's important and he understands. But messy stuff. I think about Judas betraying him and essentially, at the Last Supper, sending him off, go do what you need to do. I'm trying to think how would I handle that? What would I do in that spot? Could I don't know.
Yeah.
How I'd handle it. It's tough.
Well, but like you were saying, like Peter, he was able to restore, but Judas, he wasn't. So I think that's another thing to remember in our friendships is sometimes things go sideways and there can be restoration and sometimes there just can't. And, to not grieve too much. If you do what you can to restore it and the other person's not willing, then
Thanks too.
yeah.
But yeah, one thought I had when I was thinking of this question is that it's so important to forgive your friends when they let you down, because they will. And if you write off your friends when they blow it, you will end up cold and lonely, because that's it. There's no one that does it perfectly. And so, a couple weeks ago, a friend of mine really disappointed me. And I thought, think and believe the best about others. They have other things going on. I love them. And I'm not going to mention this again. And then turns out there were some mitigating reasons for why they did what they did. But you just have to forgive. Otherwise, you're going to end up alone.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are all great words, and I feel like this is totally a topic that we could just keep going on. And actually, I do have a few. Thank you to those of you that listened that threw in some digging deeper questions, because we got a handful, and this is one of them, kind of on this, and we might have kind of touched on it, but I just want to redirect it. They asked, is it worthy to take the blame for your friend in order to save the friendship? They said they kind of are pondering the tough love versus, or do you just let it go for the sake of the event? And I just kind of think if there's a situation where maybe your friend's trying to hide something because they're going to get in a lot more trouble, do you take the blame for them, or do you kind of let them go to the wolves, I guess, for lack of better words? So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts or an insight on that. Is it worthy to take the blame, or would you rather maybe that friend go through the consequences? Could be situational, but
Yeah, I'd like some more specifics.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what Michael was saying. I mean, sometimes tough love is the best kind of love, but then, like for me, depending on the situation, because it would be very situational, but I wouldn't call them out like in front of everybody, but I might take the blame in that circumstance, maybe. But I would talk to them alone and be like, "Hey, what is going on? Like, what are you thinking? Why did you just do that to me?" But that's so hard to know. Like,
Yeah.
there's just so many factors in that situation. But if that were a pattern where they were always doing that sort of thing, you would have to confront it. And if they weren't willing to change, that would be a toxic sort of relationship.
I think how you do it is huge, meaning sometimes we give ourselves permission to act poorly because we exercise the, I could do this, but don't answer, should I do this? Sometimes we're entitled, we could justify, okay, I'm going to go off on this person, I'm going to let him have it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, maybe you could. Should you do that? And what are going to be the repercussions of that? And like you said, sometimes it's best to say, I'm going to pull this person aside, because sometimes people say, they did this to me, so they need to hear about this. And it's like, yeah, maybe they do need to be called about it. But did you have to say it at staff meeting? Did you have to say it? Did you have to say it at the birthday party?
Right.
It's like, no, that extra part was for that was you. That wasn't for their benefit.
Wow.
It's like you should have pulled them aside. Because I think sometimes you can call people on difficult things and still honor them.
Yeah.
Like a counselor told me one time, he said, okay, if there's anger in your life, you got to find a healthy way to get that anger out without sinning more and adding more sin to the pile. So when someone's hurt you or you're in a tough relationship rub and you need to work it out, it's like, don't add more to the pile. Even if people around you societally would say, you really had a right to do that, I'd have done the same thing. That doesn't matter.
Right.
If you add it to the pile, now you have to then apologize to them for how you handled yourself in calling them on something that they did to you in the first place, that you had a right to call them on it. So
Yeah.
you got to be careful with that.
No, that's great insight from you guys. No, totally. Tough love is hard, and friendships, and just knowing when. I think, yeah, ultimately it's situational. Another question from the Digging Deeper was, and we have a counselor in the room, so this is good. What is the line, and this is a big one, what is the line between gossiping and confiding in someone? We kind of mentioned having a confidant, and I think in those close friendships, I have complete trust in you. I am going to vent. I am going to say all these things that I am justified, as Michael was saying, to say. So where is that line between confiding in someone that you trust, but it actually being gossip?
Sometimes I wonder if I've got something on my heart, and I'm deciding to vent to you, Tim, am I going to stumble you by sharing this with you?
Wow.
Do you have actually anything to do with it? Meaning, are you a part of the solution, or am I just pulling you to something that's just completely inappropriate? I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I've had someone confide in me or share a prayer request, and I am all of a sudden feeling super uncomfortable because I'm
Wow.
going, I don't think, sometimes I don't think we should be talking about this. So sometimes I've even told somebody, say, thank you, I will pray for you. You do not need to cover any more. This is specifically between you and them. But counseling context can be different. What do you think, Tom?
Well, yeah, counseling context and friendship context are a little bit different. But for me personally, and I feel like anybody can share anything they want in counseling. They're trying to work stuff out. So, and it's all in confidence anyway. But as a counselor, I may say, I really think you need to talk to this person. Like, this is not going to get resolved. And even my sister, one time, we have the same best friend, and she was talking to me about our best friend because she was hurt about something. And I finally said, you have to talk to her. Don't. And I'm her big sister. So I was able to say, don't talk to me about this again until you've talked to her. So, but in a friendship context, I think, what's your motive? Like, if I'm having a struggle with somebody and I know that Tim loves that person and he loves both of us, and I'm like, Tim, I'm really struggling. I don't know how to think about this. I'm not sure if my perspective is right, and I really want to get his input and his guidance. I think that's completely different than gossiping, because if my intent is he says, well, Tawny, this is how I saw this situation. I'm like, oh, that you're probably right. I can resolve it that way. If he says, no, I think that might be a problem, then I'll go talk to that person. So I think if our motive is really to get help in working something out in love, and we know that the person is mature enough to not judge the other person or be stumbled by it, I think that's part of having friendships.
I do think ideally a confidant would be someone who is one step removed from the relationships you're
Okay.
talking about. The danger is that you poison the well for the confidant about the person you're talking about. You're like, I can't believe they said this or they did this. And then all of a sudden your confidant, your friend, thinks less of that person. And then that isn't a healthy or good thing. It becomes trickier when, I'll just use an example, Michael and I are on staff, we're good friends, we share, something happens on staff, then we talk about it, we have to be really careful that we're not gossiping or running down a colleague.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a lot trickier then.
Yeah. I think the poison in ministry, as it was talked about, I think in some of the messages, was the prayer request, the gossip prayer request, can just be so lethal. And you bring up a good point. Like, how many times have we torn down the image of person A to person B, and those two haven't even met? Like, oh my gosh, Rod is this, and this, and somebody meets you for the first time, and I have already destroyed this not true image of you to them. So,
Well, I've had to be careful even with my with what I share with my wife.
yeah.
I know some marriages, they feel like I tell my spouse everything, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. What I'm saying is be careful with the well poisoning, especially here in
Right.
church. Some people think, well, you tell Janelle everything that's going on at church, and actually, I tell Janelle very minimal things, because what I realized years ago was I can vent about my encounter with the situation and bring her into that moment. But then what I realize is I leave her with that moment.
Mhm.
What she doesn't have is a secondary conversation I have with the person the next week where we worked it out, where we said, I'm sorry, is where we high five and hug and all that. She missed that. So she's left with this false impression
Wow.
of either a person or a situation or the health of the moment. So for me, I think this transfers to other people you would talk to, is be careful what you lay on someone, because you could be burdening them if they don't have the benefit of hearing the whole story and the resolve. Yeah, they're left with, wow, that person's terrible. So.
Yeah, I think the best case scenario is to be talking to somebody more mature than you that's gonna, listen and then direct you to go do what's the right thing to do. That would be the ideal situation.
Yeah, totally. All right, guys, I have one last thought before we kind of go into our keep digging segment. And this one's pretty interesting. We've been talking about the close people around us. I want to kind of look into how God desires friendships between believers and non-believers to be. How, if any, and I would say how, do we as believers benefit from that friendship? And then kind of our last email that we received from somebody, should your closest circle as a Christian, should they be all Jesus followers? Or is there a benefit to having your best friend maybe be a non-Christian? So, Michael, if you kind of want to kick us off with that one.
That sounds kind of like the Sunday school answer, but it's a fact. You look at Jesus, and I think about not only what Jesus said, but how he lived his life. He was a friend maker, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
He actually made friends with people that no one else would make friends with.
Right.
He, went to dinners. He was in the places making friends with people that were probably shocked that he was there. I mean, those at the party were shocked they were having this meal with him or this time with him. For sure, people on the outside, especially in religious circles, would look in and go, why is Jesus hanging with those people? So Jesus, to me, validates that this is a good pursuit. It's said several places, but Matthew 22, Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And then this love your neighbor as yourself. There's sometimes debate on what that looks like, who the neighbor is. But for sure, we all have neighbors around us. We have people in our spheres. And I think we should be engaging in friendships. So you might say, well, how does that benefit you? I guess my thought would be, how does that not benefit you if you care about people? Because there's so many special things in humanity. We're made in the image of God. And I just glean. I'm thinking about my literal neighbors in my neighborhood. Beautiful people, and I love getting to know them, and I wish I had more time to do it. I'm more rich as a person because I get to know them, but we get to share what Jesus is doing in us with them. Jesus was able to literally share what was going on in his life, and it changed them. So if we remove ourselves from being, in circles with people, man, it can be pretty dangerous.
Can I just balance that? I agree 100%. But one of the Proverbs was, walk with the wise and grow wise, and companion of fools suffers harm. Not that our non-believers are fools necessarily, but they don't have the wisdom of Christ in a sense. And so, yes, we should be making those friendships, but if that's the majority of our friendships, we're going to start looking like those people more than they start looking like us. And so somehow, and I think it's different for every person, but there's some sort of balance, some sort of ratio of close Christian friends that we ought to have, as well as non-believer friends.
Well, I think kind of naturally our closest friends will be believers. If our passion and goal in life is to know Jesus better, we're going to naturally pair up with people as our closest friends. But my other thought when you guys were talking too is, when you do have friends that are not believers yet, don't hold them to the same standards that you would your believing friends. Because I've seen people be so hard on for their language or their music or whatever. They don't need to follow our biblical principles. They're not believers yet. So, just don't be judgmental if you do have non-believing friends, because I've seen that. It just makes us look horrible when people do that.
And I agree with you, Rod. You have to be careful, because if your best friend or friends don't have the same faith background as you, you got to be careful. For example, you could go to them for counsel on a certain issue, and they might come to you with a completely different worldview,
Right.
and invalidate and say, well, of course you should do blah blah blah, and it's actually something that would maybe be a very damaging consequence to yourself if you follow that advice. So for sure, you want to make sure that that's not the primary influence, or it'll tank you.
Well, and there's a difference between being a friend and then following them. Like, we don't want to follow people that aren't following Jesus, but we could be friendly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have fun with them.
Yeah, I think my biggest temptation is to surround myself like an echo chamber with people that I believe every single thing, so we can just sit there and kind of swirl and not get that outside perspective. So as you guys have said, balance. There's a balance. Definitely.
So because of that, that's why I think you should never only watch a 49ers game. 49ers fans, you need at least one Seahawk fan.
Well,
We should have had at least one unbeliever here.
well, I mean, Seahawk unbeliever. I'm married a Seahawk fan, so there is that constant push back and forth. I don't know if she's a Seahawk fan or an anti-Niner fan.
Does it really matter?
So yeah, week 1 did not go well for. Actually, the Lord is putting a lot of Seahawk fans in my life, so He's challenging me in something. Luckily, I have Rod, who is a fellow Niner fan. So, guys, I really appreciate that. And one part of the podcast that I have truly loved is the keep digging part. A resource, whether it's a sermon, a podcast, a book on friendship that you guys would recommend to others. Do you guys have anything off the top of your head? I know I have one, but I'm going to let you guys talk first.
Without sounding cheesy, because we're in the Proverbs series, I honestly think there's so much about interpersonal relationships in Proverbs, and we just went as a church recently through a read a proverb a day. I agree with Pastor Dan. Become the friend to others that you wish they would be to you. So I think if you want to invest in friendships, be a better friend. And there's so much in Proverbs that is helpful to remind you of how to interact with others and how to be a good friend.
Yeah, and I would say if you have a really hard time with relationships, like maybe take the untangling class.
Okay.
Because I've heard so many people have been helped by that, and we don't have a lot of models of good relationships sometimes in our families and backgrounds. And I think also sometimes personality tests really help understand that different people think differently than you, and it helps you kind of meet people where they're at, and it's just fascinating. And then The Jesus I Never Knew by Philip Yancey, that book really helped me understand Jesus better and made it easier for me to think of him as my friend.
Okay.
Yeah. No other literary resources, but I agree with Michael that if you want to go deeper in friendship, be proactive. Start taking actions of communicating with people, giving to people, and there's no guarantee. I mean, there's an element of chemistry with any friendship that has to happen, as well as just effort involved. But yeah, take proactive steps to build friendship.
Totally. So just to recap, the Proverbs, taking proactivity, the Jesus I Never Knew, and then two things I want to tack on. A book I actually haven't read, but my wife did, Safe People, and it's just understanding maybe being able to identify safe people or unsafe people in your life, and how to process that. Not saying, oh, you're unsafe, we're never talking, but how to process that, and maybe if you aren't necessarily the safest person. I've made this plug a few times as we've gone through our Proverbs series, but I've been thinking about the Proverbs and interacting with people and God space. It's the series that we went through not too long ago, as well as the book. Just how to create those environments with people. Asking questions was a big one. Listening. My mind just keeps going back to that God space. So a lot of you listening might have that book somewhere in your bookshelf. Dust it off. Give it a look. It's a quick read, and it's a good read. So those are just some resources I think that could help you guys. And yeah, any last thoughts, my wonderful friends? All right. Well,
Friendship is worth it.
oh, 100%. I think that's a good way to end, as well as the tag that Pastor Dan said, be the friend you're looking for is looking for. That's something that'll kind of keep you spinning for a while. So, guys, thank you very much. Digging Deeper peeps. Until next time, we have a very good podcast next week. It'll be our last one on Proverbs. So until then, see you later.